What would you think if Sylvester Stallone suddenly found himself a silent witness to a brutal battle that Elena, his housekeeper, had been fighting every single day for her survival and that of her daughter? Follow us until the end, because what begins as a silent cry for help will transform into a powerful journey of strength, a quiet kind of heroism that changes both of their lives forever. Elena, the hardworking woman who kept Stallone's household running without ever asking for anything in return, had always earned his deep respect. But lately, he noticed something different. Her once bright smile no longer reached her eyes, and the lightness she used to carry into every room had slowly disappeared. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Stallone came home earlier than expected from a production meeting downtown. He pulled into the driveway just as Elena was leaving. She didn't see him. He sat in the Range Rover, watching as she hurried down the street, clutching a frayed tote bag against her chest. The sky hung low and gray, the first fat drops of rain splattering across the windshield. Something gnawed at him, a feeling he couldn't shake, something deeper than curiosity, closer to dread. Without thinking too much about it, he pulled on a ball cap, grabbed his leather jacket from the passenger seat, and followed on foot, keeping his distance as she made her way to the bus stop at the corner of Sunset Boulevard. The city blurred by as Stallone sat hunched in the back of the Metro bus, his face buried in the collar of his jacket, eyes locked on Elena's small, tense frame, 2 rows ahead. They rode for nearly an hour, passing through the glittering shop fronts of West Hollywood into the cracked sidewalks and chain-link fences of East Los Angeles. Elena disembarked near an old convenience store, its neon sign flickering in the gathering gloom. Stallone waited a beat, then followed, his heart hammering strangely against his ribs. She crossed the street, glancing nervously over her shoulder, and ducked down an alley lined with dumpsters and graffiti. Stallone hesitated for a split second at the corner, instincts honed from a lifetime of playing tough guys on screen kicking in now in real life. The alley stank of rot and wet concrete, puddles reflecting the dim orange of the overhead streetlights. He pressed himself against a wall, peering around the corner just in time to see a man step out of a shadowed doorway. The man was tall, broad, wearing a battered denim jacket and a look of simmering anger. Stallone didn't recognize him, but the way Elena stiffened told him everything he needed to know. She tried to walk past, head down, but the man grabbed her arm roughly. Stallone could hear the raised voices, even from where he stood. "Where's my money, huh? You think you can just disappear?" The man snarled, shaking her hard enough that she stumbled. Elena mumbled something too low for Stallone to catch, but it didn't matter. The man's reaction was instant, vicious. He slapped her, the sound cracking through the alley like a gunshot. Stallone surged forward before his brain even finished processing the scene. But Elena, astonishingly, raised a trembling hand, signaling him not to interfere. It stopped him cold, feet rooted to the wet pavement. She said something quick, desperate, placating, and the man, sneering, shoved her hard against the brick wall before stalking away, cursing under his breath. Elena slumped for a moment, one hand pressed against the wall for support, before straightening herself with visible effort. She pulled her jacket tighter around her small frame and picked up the tote bag, its contents now half spilled into a puddle. Stallone stepped back into the shadows, fists clenched uselessly at his sides, rage and helplessness warring in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to confront the bastard, to put him flat on his back where he belonged. But the look in Elena's eyes stopped him. Fear. Raw, naked fear. Not for herself, but for something, someone else. She didn't notice him trailing her the next few blocks to a crumbling apartment building squatting between two abandoned warehouses. She keyed herself in through a side door that barely latched and disappeared inside. Stallone waited, wrestling with himself, the rain soaking through his jacket. After a few minutes, the door creaked open again, and Elena emerged, this time with a small figure clinging to her side. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, her hair pulled into 2 messy braids, wearing a coat 3 sizes too big. Elena knelt, adjusting the girl's scarf with a tenderness that wrenched Stallone's heart. The girl looked up at her mother, trust and love plain in her wide brown eyes. They walked together down the street to a small food pantry nestled between a closed-down gas station and a boarded-up laundromat. Stallone stayed hidden, watching as Elena waited in line for a bag of donated groceries, the little girl's hand never leaving her. The pieces clicked into place like a grim puzzle. Elena wasn't just struggling. She was running, hiding, surviving, and she was doing it all while showing up at his house every morning with a neat uniform and a smile stitched painfully onto her face. The bus ride home was a blur. Stallone barely remembered getting back to his Range Rover, barely remembered the drive through slick, rain-soaked streets, back to the manicured perfection of Beverly Hills. He wandered his house that night like a ghost. The polished marble floors, the soaring ceilings, the priceless art on the walls. None of it could quiet the echo of that slap ringing in his ears. None of it could wash away the memory of Elena's bowed head, the resignation in her shoulders as she picked herself up from the alley floor. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't sit still. The next morning, he left an envelope with a thick stack of hundreds under Elena's cleaning cloth, hoping maybe she'd take it. No strings attached. But when he returned from his workout, the envelope was still there, untouched, precisely where he left it. At dinner, he tried to bring it up carefully. "Elena," he said, his voice low, "if you ever need anything." She cut him off gently but firmly, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Thank you, Mr. Stallone, but I'm okay." Her eyes said otherwise, and Stallone, sitting in the silence of his enormous dining room, realized he couldn't force her to accept help. He couldn't save her the way a movie script would allow him to save someone. All he could do was make sure she knew he saw her, really saw her, and that he wasn't going to look away. The days passed, but Stallone couldn't shake the image from his mind. It colored everything he did. At the gym, during meetings, even during casual conversations, his mind would drift back to the alley, to Elena bracing herself against a rain-slick wall. He had seen violence before, on film sets, in rougher parts of his youth, but nothing compared to the helpless anger of watching someone endure it in silence. He started paying more attention, subtle but deliberate. He noticed the bruises Elena tried to hide with long sleeves, even as the Southern California heat sweltered. He noticed how she flinched when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. She never said a word, never asked for time off, never missed a day. She simply moved through the mansion like a ghost, efficient and invisible, carrying her secret like a scar beneath her skin. Stallone knew he couldn't confront her directly again. Not yet. Trust was fragile, and he'd already seen how quick she was to retreat behind that polite smile. He needed another way. One morning after Elena had left, Stallone made some discreet calls. His assistant, Mark, was good with logistics and better with secrets. Stallone told him only the bare minimum, that he needed to find a safe place for a woman and her child, somewhere anonymous, somewhere no questions would be asked. Mark didn't pry. Within hours, he had a list. A modest 2-bedroom apartment in Pasadena, close enough to downtown LA for work opportunities, but far enough to feel like a fresh start. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, secure, private, perfect. Stallone visited the place himself under an alias, walking through the empty rooms, picturing Elena and her daughter filling the space with life again. He arranged for a month's rent in advance and utilities to be paid anonymously. He set up a grocery account at a nearby store, tucked a prepaid cell phone into a kitchen drawer in case she needed it. Everything in place, but now came the hard part, convincing her to accept it. That afternoon, he waited until Elena finished wiping down the living room windows before he approached her. No grand speeches, no pity, just quiet words. "Elena, there's a place," he said, voice low, steady. "It's yours if you want it. No strings, no expectations." She froze, her cloth halfway across the glass. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then slowly, she turned, her face guarded. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, the edge of suspicion threading her voice. Stallone didn't flinch. "Because no one should have to live in fear," he said simply. "Because you deserve better." She looked down, twisting the rag in her hands until the fabric nearly tore. "I can't owe anyone," she whispered. "I can't let my daughter think we're charity cases." "You don't owe me anything," Stallone said. "This isn't charity. It's just a door. You can walk through it or not. That's your choice." Elena hesitated. He could see the battle raging behind her eyes. Pride versus desperation. Fear versus hope. Finally, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "I'll think about it," she said. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was enough. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended rhythm. Elena went about her work as usual, polite but distant. Stallone didn't press, didn't bring it up again. He waited, giving her the space she needed. Then, one Friday evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, she approached him in the kitchen. "Is it still available?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The place you mentioned?" Stallone smiled, relief flooding through him. "It's yours," he said. "Whenever you're ready." The next morning, Elena didn't come to work. Stallone found a handwritten note tucked neatly under a coffee mug on the counter. It simply read, "Thank you for seeing me." No signature, but it didn't need one. He stood there for a long time, staring at the neat cursive, feeling something shift inside him. Weeks passed. Life settled into its normal rhythm, or what passed for normal in a movie star's world. Stallone kept busy, filming promotional spots for an upcoming project, attending charity galas, posing for endless photographs where his smile never quite reached his eyes. But behind the scenes, he kept quiet tabs on Elena. Through Mark, he learned that she had moved into the apartment with her daughter, who was now enrolled in a small local elementary school. They weren't thriving yet, not exactly, but they were stable, safe. One evening, after a late dinner with some old friends in downtown LA, Stallone found himself driving aimlessly through the city streets, the skyline a jagged silhouette against the inky sky. Without fully deciding to, he found himself pulling up in front of Elena's new apartment complex. He stayed in the car, engine idling, headlights off. He wasn't sure why he was there. Just to check, he told himself. Just to see. Through the second-floor window, he could see soft yellow light spilling onto the small balcony. Silhouettes moved inside. Elena setting a plate on a table, the little girl dancing clumsily around the living room, her laughter floating down to the sidewalk. It was a simple scene, ordinary by any measure. But to Stallone, it felt sacred. A woman reclaiming her life, a child reclaiming her innocence, a future pieced back together, one careful step at a time. He drove away before they could spot him, his chest tight, his eyes stinging in a way he would never admit if asked. At home, he sat in his den staring at the fireplace long after the flames had died down, the empty whiskey glass growing warm in his hand. He thought about how easy it was to miss the quiet struggles happening all around you, how easy it was to drown in your own noise and miss the battles others were fighting in silence. He thought about Elena, about her daughter, about the thousands like them slipping through the cracks every day, invisible to the world until it was too late. And he realized he wasn't done. Helping one family wasn't enough. It wasn't about grand gestures or newspaper headlines. It was about showing up, paying attention, refusing to look away. The next morning, Stallone called Mark. "Find me some groups," he said. "Ones that help women in trouble. Ones that actually make a difference." Mark didn't ask questions. He never did. Within a week, Stallone had donated anonymously to 3 shelters across Los Angeles, enough to fund dozens of safe beds, school supplies for children, legal aid for mothers fighting for custody. He didn't tell anyone. There were no press releases, no staged photo ops. It wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing. And somehow, in the quiet of those small, unseen victories, Stallone found a piece of himself he hadn't even realized was missing. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, life built itself back up from the wreckage. Elena found work nearby, not scrubbing marble floors for Hollywood royalty, but managing a small community center's kitchen, serving hot meals to families who knew what it meant to have nothing and still find a way to keep going. Her daughter, Isabella, flourished at her new school. She made friends, brought home drawings of rainbows and stick figures. Filling their small apartment with laughter Stallone could almost hear when he drove past on quiet evenings. He didn't interfere. He didn't insert himself into their lives. But sometimes, when he found himself in that part of town, after a late shoot or a charity dinner, he would swing by, just to make sure the lights were on, the windows warm, the world outside not too harsh. It wasn't about guilt anymore. It was about connection, about a kind of responsibility that didn't come with scripts or applause. One Thursday afternoon in late November, a knock at Stallone's door pulled him from a half-hearted session at the home gym. He opened it to find Elena standing there, rain dripping from the hem of her jacket, her daughter peeking shyly from behind her. In Elena's hands was a small, neatly wrapped package. She hesitated, looking up at him with that familiar mixture of pride and vulnerability that still hit him harder than any crit. "We just wanted to say thank you," she said simply. Stallone stepped aside, ushering them into the wide foyer that suddenly felt cavernous and sterile compared to the simple, vibrant life they carried with them. They sat at the kitchen table, sharing cups of coffee and cocoa, Isabella's little feet swinging off the chair as she chattered about her new best friend, her favorite storybooks, the kitten she was begging her mom to adopt from the shelter. Stallone listened, really listened, and for once he wasn't the center of attention, wasn't the legend or the action star. He was just a man, sitting with people who reminded him what strength actually looked like. He opened the package carefully, revealing a hand-painted mug. The words, "Thank you for seeing us," written in wobbly, colorful letters around the rim, little hearts and stars scattered across the ceramic. He stared at it longer than he probably should have, swallowing the sudden tightness in his throat. "This means more than you know," he managed, his voice rougher than usual. Elena smiled, her real smile this time, the one he hadn't seen since before the rain-soaked alley. They stayed a while longer, talking easily now, the past lingering like a distant echo rather than a present fear. Before they left, Isabella hugged him fiercely around the waist, leaving a sticky handprint on his workout shirt that he didn't have the heart to wipe away. As he watched them walk down the long driveway toward the battered Honda Elena had finally managed to buy, Stallone felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A deep, settled kind of hope. The next morning, inspired in a way he couldn't quite explain, he called Mark again. "Set up a foundation," he said. "Quiet. No red carpets. No gala dinners. I want it to actually do something." Mark, ever the professional, didn't ask for more details. Within months, the Stallone Foundation quietly began funneling money into shelters, community kitchens, after-school programs in neighborhoods that never saw a dime of Hollywood's glittering wealth. There were no interviews, no magazine spreads. Stallone didn't want his face on a glossy brochure. He wanted real change, the kind that came without strings or applause. He started spending his free afternoons volunteering, not as Sylvester Stallone, the icon, but as just another man stacking canned goods, painting walls, reading to kids who clung to every word like it was gold. And slowly, other people noticed, not because he shouted, but because he showed up. Crew members from his film sets started asking how they could help. Old friends from the industry quietly donated time and money. No headlines, no fanfare. Even strangers, people who had admired him from afar, found themselves inspired to act, to pay attention to the lives unfolding quietly in the margins of their cities. One evening, after finishing a late-night shift at a small food pantry downtown, Stallone found himself walking alone through the nearly empty streets. The city hummed around him, alive in a way he hadn't noticed before. The lights weren't just neon and noise anymore. They were stories, lives, battles being fought and won and lost every second. He thought about Elena and Isabella, about the way the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways you could never predict. He thought about how easy it would have been to stay comfortable, to look away. And he thought about how lucky he was that he hadn't. The next morning, sitting at his kitchen counter, Stallone opened a letter that had been slipped into his mailbox without a return address. The handwriting was careful, almost hesitant. It was from Elena. She wrote about how different life was now, how Isabella was thriving, how she had started taking evening classes at a local community college because for the first time in years, she believed there was a future worth reaching for. She ended the letter with a simple line. "You didn't just save us. You reminded us we were worth saving." Stallone folded the letter carefully and slid it into a book he kept on his nightstand, an old, battered copy of The Old Man and the Sea, a story about quiet resilience and battles fought in silence. It felt fitting. Months later, at a small community fundraiser, Organized by one of the shelters he had supported, Stallone found himself sitting quietly at the back of a crowded room while Elena took the stage. She didn't mention names. She didn't tell her full story. But she spoke with a strength that made the air in the room shift. "Sometimes," she said, "you survive so long, you forget you deserve more than just surviving. Sometimes you need someone to notice, to remind you that you're still here, that you still matter." The applause that followed wasn't thunderous or staged. It was soft, genuine, the kind that seeps under your skin and stays there. Stallone didn't go up to her afterward. He didn't need to. Their eyes met across the room, a nod passing between them, an understanding deeper than words. Driving home that night, Stallone smiled to himself. Not the Hollywood smile, not the one he wore for cameras, but a real one, the kind that comes from somewhere so deep it surprises even you. Life hadn't gotten easier. It wasn't supposed to, but it had gotten richer, fuller, more real. And somehow, in helping someone else find their way back to themselves, Stallone realized he had found his own way too.